So when I create a list of these books, I can see how much they shaped me. I'm 46 years old and I'm still talking about ideas I encountered when I was 23 and 24 years old. Know thyself, nothing in excess, love or fear, acceptance, surrender, intrinsic worth, curiosity instead of judgment, presence, belonging, creativity. These things stopped being things I read about and they became things I practiced. And eventually they became things that shaped how I support other people. That is the power of wisdom. That is the power of alchemizing trauma into the light and sharing it with other people. And it's the power of the right teacher and the right information finding you at the exact right time.
Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our little safe space. I love it here. I hope you do too. And I've been waiting for a while to do this episode. In fact, when this podcast was just an idea, I wrote out a ton of ideas for episodes because I wasn't even sure if I could do a podcast or if I could even teach on this platform. And way down the list, I thought, I really want to talk about the books that have impacted my spiritual, emotional, and personal growth journey. And I remember thinking, I have so much to cover before I talk about that. So many foundational things. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if this podcast would even make it that far, because it was pretty far down the list. And here we are. We still have lots of foundational things to cover, but I was really excited because I truly believe that the right book, tool, teacher, or resource can find you exactly at the time you need it. I know that that's been so true for me because I can look back over my life and see the crazy ways that God and the universe sent me what I needed during the challenging time I was in. And books were huge for me. Books gave me language before I had language for things I was feeling and experiencing. Teachers who introduced me to ideas that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And there were books that supported me in every part of my journey, spiritually, emotionally, personally, and ultimately heavily influenced the work that I do with my clients today. So my intention for the next 2 episodes is to share the books that have profoundly impacted my life. And of course, I want to put it in one episode, and there's so many books. I couldn't fit it in one episode. So we're going to break it into 2. But I wanted to share some of the books that have inspired me, supported me, and taught me along my own growth journey, with the hope that maybe one of these books finds you exactly at the right time too. I love learning. Even though when I was in school, I don't think I loved learning as much as when I have the autonomy to learn exactly what I like. But I absolutely love learning and am a total seeker. I want to know as much as I can in this life. And I love having access to other people's wisdom, lived experience, and research. I think that when you're going through something tough, it makes you feel less alone. And I know that some of these books that I've shared have been like a best friend during some of the hardest times of my life. So the next two episodes are not reading assignments. I just want you to listen for the book that you feel drawn to, because maybe the books are finding you today. And that's exactly where I'm going to start, because my spiritual journey started with a book that found me. I was probably about maybe 22 or 23 years old, and really starting to understand that I had some complex emotional situations going on that I did not have the capacity to solve on my own. I started to go to therapy, and I started to lean into seeking out more information. So one day I opened my underwear drawer and I saw a folded piece of paper, like a ripped piece of paper that was folded up. And written on it were the words, "Anatomy of the Spirit" by Carolyn Myss. To this day, I still have absolutely no idea how that piece of paper ended up in my underwear drawer. That is not typically a place that I put things that I want to keep and find later. I remember that the writing was not mine. I'm sure what probably happened is someone wrote it down on a piece of paper for me, and maybe I put it on my dresser and it fell in my underwear drawer, but I had no recollection of someone suggesting this book to me or giving it to me on a piece of paper. So even then I thought, okay, this might be a sign. And this is before Amazon or where you could go get like quick shipping. So I had to go schlep to the bookstore. And I went and found the book, and my life has never been the same. Carolyn Myss's work explores the relationship between our emotional lives, our beliefs, our energy, our spiritual health, and our physical experience. That book was the first book that gave me permission to think outside of the box and really start to look inward for every solution in my life, including physical issues. The book asks you to get curious about what you're carrying, where your energy is going, what patterns keep repeating, and how does that play out in your health. In the book, she also has you get curious about where you're holding resentments, old beliefs that don't serve you anymore. Sound familiar? Or a lack of forgiveness that's keeping you stuck. And she puts a lot of emphasis on personal responsibility for our inner lives. Anatomy of the Spirit started my spiritual journey. It made me even more curious about intuition, energy, consciousness, and healing in a way I had never been exposed to before. And of course, at 23 years old, when I found a piece of paper in my underwear drawer, I never knew that these questions would eventually become a part of my life's work. I know there are some books that give you information, and some books open a door. This particular book opened a door for me. Every book that I'm going to mention on today's episode and next week's episode are books that opened doors. Once that door was open, I wanted to know more. And then my love of self-help books emerged. I love them so much, in fact, that I just had my sister and my niece here over the summer, and we were leaving to go on a road trip. And I said, in case anyone has any issue going on in their life and would like reading material on the way to our lake house, peruse my bookshelves, because I think if anybody had any issue, there is probably a book on my bookshelf that can be a companion. So Carolyn Myss opened the door for my spiritual and personal growth journey. And then I found Marianne Williamson. I absolutely love Marianne Williamson's work. When I read her book, A Return to Love, I was really introduced to the concept of love versus fear. Marianne does a great job in A Return to Love to explain how fear creates separation, scarcity, control, and ego. And that love brings us back towards connection, which means that sometimes the miracle is simply that I was looking at something through fear and now I can see it differently. And that, in my opinion, is a total miracle. And there is a quote from A Return to Love that has literally stayed with me forever. The quote says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." That hit me. What if we are that powerful? What would understanding that level of power, once we realize we're that powerful, then the next knock at the door is action. And I think that we struggle more with understanding the capacity of our power than we have a fear of failure. It also means that knowing yourself comes with responsibility. That once you see a pattern, what are you going to do with it? Once you connect to your inner guides and you know what you want or you know what you don't want, what will you choose? Once you recognize that fear is leading you, are you willing to do something different? And I do believe that there is pain in self-discovery, or discomfort is really the way that I would word it. She does such a beautiful job in that book of also identifying that there is a dull pain in remaining unconscious and repeating the same thing for years. I tell my clients probably on a daily basis that staying the same is uncomfortable and creates pain and suffering. Taking the steps to change and do something different can create pain and discomfort, but only one of the two is purpose-driven, meaning only one of the two is leading you towards the life you want. A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson is a book that left me with a question I still ask myself today. Is love leading me right now, or is fear? So next up on my list is a book that opened a door that I have never been the same since I went through. I found A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle when I was around 24 years old. And it definitely changed my life. This book brought the concept of acceptance, presence, and ego into my life in a way I had never experienced before. It shined the light of consciousness on how much unhappiness comes from being attached to the story of who we think we're supposed to be. Being chosen, winning, looking successful, being approved of, having life look the way we thought it would. And we can become so attached to what something means about us that we completely leave the moment we are actually living in. Anytime I recommend this book, I recommend it in the same way that I learned it. At the time when I found A New Earth, Oprah had Eckhart on and they did a whole series. It was very groundbreaking at that time, where they went through each chapter with a live audience and people calling in on Skype. That's how long ago this was. It was probably the best way for me to read that book because the book has a lot of abstract concepts, a lot of things that are hard to integrate into the society and conditioning that we all live in and have. So I highly recommend. I know that just recently she had Eckhart on again, and I think they talked about it like 10 years later. I highly encourage anyone who's interested or called to reading this book to look up Oprah's series on it with Eckhart and listen to it at the end of every chapter that you read. It really helped me understand and land the concepts. But there was also another profound part of A New Earth that has really stayed with me. Eckhart talks about a place called Delphi in Greece which I know people have said it's Delphi, but just FYI, I went to it in Greece and they called it Delphi. So call it whatever you'd like. I'm just going to call it what they were calling it. But Delphi was basically the first religious Mecca that ever existed. And people would go there to worship whatever gods they were worshiping. And they had soothsayers, which are basically intuitives, that would sit in this one room. And there were cracks in the floor and there were gases that came up from that part of the earth. And they would breathe in the gases and then they would answer questions that people were coming to have answered. So they would have like Roman empires and people would go there to say, should we invade this country? What does your intuition tell you? So they would go there to basically have their future read. And in the story in A New Earth, he talks about how there were 2 archways into that particular part with the soothsayers. And over the archways, translated into English, one said, nothing in excess, and the other said, know thyself. And what they would say is that even if you didn't get your future told, you got what you came there to receive. That the most sage wisdom or guidance was nothing in excess and know thyself. When I read that book, however many years ago, I was like, ooh, I'm going to get a tattoo of that. Know thyself. I still haven't, but it is on deck for my next tattoo because I think it's what I came here to do. I came here to know and love myself as deeply as possible in this life. And I think that it's the core of this work. People come in here to improve their life and relationships, and they come out knowing themselves in a much deeper capacity. So I loved that story in the book. Know yourself, know your values, know what scares you, know what makes you feel alive, know where you lose yourself. And I think also really great wisdom, nothing in excess, because we can overdo just about anything. Working, helping, thinking, controlling, even healing. At some point, you got to live in this moment too. I believe that my copy of A New Earth is so worn out because I have read it so many times. I have brought it to so many different locations because I just think that it is a book that you pick up from different levels of consciousness and it speaks differently to you. And in fact, in the very beginning of the book, he says, if you pick up this book and it doesn't speak to you, don't throw it away. Put it back in your bookshelf. It might talk to you in 10 years. So to me, it's the book that keeps on giving. I understand Eckhart has other amazing work. I love his YouTube videos. He has a book called The Power of Now, which is amazing. A New Earth opened the door to a much deeper way of thinking for me, and it even helped me in traffic. I still think about that book in traffic because he talks about how to stay in the moment and not resist what is, and he uses traffic as an example. Love Eckhart, love everything Eckhart does. So that leads me to my next book selection, The Universe Has Your Back by Gabrielle Bernstein. I love this book because in my opinion, it never hurts to reconnect to the idea that there is something that is bigger than you, that is connected to you at all times, that you are in a co-creative process with, that has your back and is always operating in your highest good. I'll speak for myself. It never hurts for me to reconnect to that idea. And The Universe Has Your Back also goes into the love versus fear idea, but it also talks about surrender. And I know you guys have heard me talk about surrender a lot on this podcast. The definition I love is that surrender is giving over, not giving up, which that in itself would indicate that we are trusting something bigger than us. And it means that there are things that are mine to do in this co-creative process with myself and the universe. I can speak up for myself. I can act. I can ask. I can set a boundary. I can make a decision. I can change my behavior. And then there are some things I simply do not control. Other people, their choices, their feelings, the timing of things, and the outcome. It has been a really comforting idea for me that when I feel powerless, which is really hard for people who grew up feeling powerless, but when I feel powerless, that there is something that I can rely on, trust, and know is supporting me no matter what, even in the times that I don't fully understand it. Gabby is an amazing spiritual teacher. I repost a lot of her posts because they're really simple reminders of how supported we are by the universe, God, creator, source, whatever you want to call it. I love her meditations. I know that she does a lot of challenges. Like just recently, she did a Trust the Universe challenge. She does a meditation challenge. She does challenges throughout the year. They're affordably priced. If digging into trusting the universe, leaning into your spiritual side is calling to you, that might be a great book to pick up. The next book and teacher found me during COVID. And it's just more confirmation to me that when you are ready to learn, when you are going through a challenge, the universe will send you aligned support. So I actually found the teacher first, then the book. Usually it's kind of the other way around. But I had heard about Panache Desai during COVID because we were all stuck in our house. And as someone who's a do, go, go, go type of person, there was nowhere to go. It was a little bit hard. And someone somewhere, I don't know how I found it, sent me this man who was doing a free 20-minute meditation every day during lockdown. And I started to tune in. And I was so grateful that I was connected with a beautiful human being and a beautiful spiritual teacher. Once I started doing the meditations quite frequently, Panache became a part of my day. And Panache also didn't just do those free meditations during COVID. He's been doing them ever since. You can still, if you go to his website and put your email in, every morning, it will send you a link to hop on a Zoom meeting and just meditate and receive beautiful guidance from a beautiful soul. When I started doing the meditations regularly, I was like, what can I get my hands on that Panache is doing? Because I love him as a teacher. And I came across his book, You Are Enough. And a core concept of that book is instead of constantly trying to escape fear, anxiety, self-doubt, or the parts of ourselves we don't like, what happens if we turn towards ourselves? What if the way through really is the way in? And one of the biggest takeaways from that book, your fundamental human value is intrinsic. Nothing can add or subtract to or from your worth. Your value exists right now. It isn't waiting for you at the end of an accomplishment. It doesn't increase because somebody chooses you, and it doesn't disappear because somebody doesn't. And that book is a great reminder that if your worth doesn't have to be earned, imagine how differently you might live. That leads me to my next one. I know you guys have heard me bring up the map of consciousness countless times on this podcast. I am not able to teach other people's copyrighted work, and I respect that. So I can't bring it into this podcast, but I can talk about its impact and how profoundly it has changed my life. The map of consciousness is a tool created by a man named Dr. David Hawkins. Dr. David Hawkins was a kinesiologist and noticed that his patients were coming in and that a lot of them that had similar physical issues were going through similar emotional and spiritual challenges. So he decided to study and calibrate the energy of feelings. And he put it into a concrete map. And that map has seriously changed my life. And not just me, I use it with all my clients. It's one of those if you know type of things. And I'm sure anybody who's worked with me that's listening is like, oh yeah, girl, we know. So there are 3 books that kind of fall under this umbrella of the teachings of Dr. David Hawkins. The first one is Power vs. Force. Letting Go is the second book. And the third book is The Map of Consciousness Explained. Dr. David Hawkins' work and those 3 books, and including The Map of Consciousness as a tool, was the first time that in a super succinct and simplified way, I witnessed someone integrate spirituality and feelings. The Map of Consciousness gave me a framework for understanding that we experience life very differently depending on the state and the vibration we are currently operating from. So essentially, he takes positive and negative feelings and gives them a vibrational charge. So we can see that shame is a negative vibrational energy. Guilt is a negative vibrational energy. And to have a visual associated with it that you can hang on your wall, walk by and go, okay, wait, where am I? Where was I earlier when I got activated and everything went south? We can start to name and identify the different feelings and whether that feeling is positive or negative, because we cannot create the life of our dreams from a negative vibrational state. We can't call in positive things from a negative vibrational state. And it is such a helpful tool to be able to recognize what emotion you're in, whether that's a positive or negative vibrational energy, and what you need in order to shift up and out of it. Because different feelings and different vibrational energies see the world differently. For instance, fear sees the world differently than acceptance. Shame sees the world differently than courage. And anger sees differently than love. The Map of Consciousness taught me to ask, where am I right now? And where am I vibrating? Instead of making myself wrong for being there or staying in a state of confusion because I don't even know what feeling I'm actually in. The 3 books that I suggested significantly helped me with my emotional intelligence, because not only did it help me identify feelings, it helped me use those feelings to help myself for tasks like thinking and problem solving, where I always thought I had to get away from my feelings in order to get the life that I wanted. It was the tool that I never knew I needed and truly found me. Didn't even seek it out. And those 3 books helped me ask questions like, can I stop gripping onto things? Can I stop fighting every feeling? Can I let something move through me instead of trying to control it? And Dr. David Hawkins is one of those teachers that opened a door for me where life completely changed, and I returned to his teachings again and again. And those teachings have greatly inspired my work with my clients. My next book is Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. Radical Acceptance had a profound impact on me because it goes directly after a belief that I personally have struggled with. The belief that there is something wrong with me. And I know firsthand so much suffering comes from that belief. I should be farther along. I should be different. I shouldn't feel like this. I should be better by now. And there is one part of the book that has stayed with me from the moment I read it. And to this day, I have a hard time speaking about it because I get emotional every time. But there is a story in the book about a woman who is at the end of her life. And she is dying. And right before she takes her last breath, she says, "Oh, I thought something was wrong with me this whole time." Takes her last breath and dies. I had this book suggested to me by my amazing therapist because shame has been something that I've dealt with my entire life. And I totally related to that lady because I've spent a lot of my life thinking there was something wrong with me. And it comes up because I'm human. And to think that you get to the end of your life and that's when you have the realization, I can't believe I thought something was wrong with me this whole time. It was so inspirational that I don't want to get to the end of my life carrying this heaviness of shame and ruining my whole experience based off a belief that isn't true. Radical acceptance says, this is where I am. This is what I feel. This is what is true today. And I can start here. I can grow without rejecting myself. And I really needed that reminder. Now let's bring Gabby Bernstein back in and talk about a book that is a doozy. It's a doozy to read. And I refer this book to clients all the time. Judgment Detox by Gabrielle Bernstein. You know, our brain is a categorical device. We judge as a means of navigating this place. All of us judge. And I think that it is a really brave thing to get curious about our relationship with judgment and how it impacts ourselves and the people we're in relationship with. And Judgment Detox helped me think differently about judgment. Instead of deciding that judgment is bad, Gabby asks us to look underneath it. Sometimes judgment is covering for other feelings. Fear, shame, hurt, insecurity, feeling inadequate. And the thought is, if I stay focused on everything that is wrong with you, maybe I don't have to feel what hurts inside of me. And she does such a beautiful job of explaining that judgment creates separation. And the end goal is to get back towards connection and compassion. And that sounds like something that I teach constantly in this work, shifting from being judgmental to getting curious. Instead of what is wrong with me, what is happening with me? What is underneath this? What hurts? What am I afraid this means? And I love the idea of shortening our comeback time, because growth isn't about never getting activated again. Again, if I could teach you guys how to do that, I'd be on a yacht in the south of France because y'all would be paying me so much money. And of course, we wouldn't be learning and growing. We wouldn't be learning and growing if you were never activated. But I'm a big fan of noticing it sooner, coming back to center sooner, and returning to ourselves sooner. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay is definitely one of my favorite books. I found it so long ago. This might have been the first book that I really encountered because it was in my therapist's bookshelf. And whenever we had a medical issue, we would go get it and we would look in the index and see what spiritual and emotional challenge went along with the physical challenge listed. But I never read it cover to cover until later. And I was familiar with Louise Hay, and she was such an eloquent speaker. She started Hay House Media. She's just a really, really neat lady. And somewhere in my own little judgment, I thought, oh, she's probably had like some perfect life. And oh, goodness, when you read You Can Heal Your Life, that is not the case. And such a good reminder to read Judgment Detox because my judgment was off. In reading the whole book, Louise Hay really got me thinking about beliefs and how we speak to ourselves. To bring awareness around, what am I telling myself all day long? What have I repeated so often that it doesn't even sound like a belief anymore? It sounds like a fact. Maybe it's, I'm not enough. Nothing works out for me. People always leave. I have to be perfect. And Louise Hay, may she rest in peace, is the queen of affirmations. I think she even coined that in the self-help world. I love Louise Hay. I love all of her meditations. I listen to her on YouTube often. She is a gem, and I feel so blessed that I got to be on the planet at the same time as her. In addition, which I already mentioned a little bit, I love the index in the back of this book. And it's another, if you know, you know. If you have worked with me before, you are familiar that very often when my clients come in with a physical issue, that we take a pause to get curious as to what spiritual and emotional issue could be going on with them. So I'll pull out my trusted little book, which is never farther than arm's reach from my desk and this camera. And we read what the physical and spiritual challenge might be. I would say that it's about 95% accurate every time. And I've been using it for the entire time I've been coaching and for myself before that. And what I love is that within the book, there's also an affirmation. So there's an awareness that my emotional and spiritual state is impacting my body. And there's also a way to realign that through the use of affirmations. This is definitely a book that I recommend getting as a paper copy because the index is gold. It's amazing. You're not going to be able to use it the same way if you get it on Audible. So I highly recommend getting a physical copy of that book. I've had mine forever. Again, I have such an old version that the cover is not even the same anymore. Now, I'm going to guess everybody listening knows who Brené Brown is. If you don't, she is worth a Google search. One of my favorite books, because I probably have read all of her books, is Braving the Wilderness, because of the way she differentiates fitting in and belonging. Fitting in asks, who do I have to become so you will accept me? Belonging asks, can I actually bring myself with me here? And sometimes belonging to yourself means somebody else is going to disagree. You may be misunderstood. You may have friendships change and have to be alone for a period of time. And that is the wilderness. And this book strengthens something I believe deeply. If I have to continually abandon myself in order to belong somewhere, I'm probably fitting in. And that is not actual belonging. A couple left, and I still got a couple great faves in this list. Elizabeth Gilbert is one of my favorite teachers, one of my favorite writers. And I came across her book, Big Magic, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 years ago when I was in a place where I needed to start creating. I love this book because personal growth cannot only be about fixing yourself. At some point, I want you to live. And Elizabeth Gilbert talks about creativity through curiosity rather than fear. I love her idea that fear can come along for the ride. Fear just doesn't get to drive. And that in order to create, you don't have to wait until you're fearless. You can create while you're scared. In fact, try creating something when you're scared. Follow an idea because it makes you curious or lights you up. You don't need someone to give you permission. Everything you create does not have to become a career or monetized. It doesn't have to prove your worth or be an outlet to receive acceptance. You can simply make something because it makes you feel alive. And I love that because our younger parts don't only hold our pain. They hold our life force too, our creativity, play, adventure, curiosity, expression. And we don't have to give up on those things because we're an adult. As an adult, we need to learn to reintegrate those things. Another huge takeaway from that book is the concept that ideas are not ours, that the universe has selected us to birth that idea. I highly recommend this book to anyone who is struggling in a creative experience, whether you're creating something for work, creating art, whatever it is, creation of any kind. This book is a must read. And this brings me to my last book suggestion today. The Tears That Taught Me by Morgan Richard Oliver. This is less of a self-help book and more of a collection of poetry. In fact, I have it right here all the time. Because sometimes you need words, not necessarily that teach you, but make you feel less alone. And that is what I love about The Tears That Taught Me. It is poetry and prose around healing, growth, grief, letting go, boundaries, and self-worth. It allows painful experiences to actually be painful, and then eventually asks, what did this teach me? What am I being asked to release? What am I outgrowing? What do I know now that I didn't know before? I think this is a beautiful book for someone that is in a tender season. Sometimes you need a book to teach you, and sometimes you need one to sit beside you. And this one feels like that. And like I said, it is typically beside me on this desk. I'm going to read one of my favorite poems from this book, just to give you a little taste, because this one, it is forever earmarked. I think it's called earmarked in this book for me. That's the thing about removing those rose-colored glasses. You begin to recognize yourself, your environment, and your life as it is, and not as you would have it. It's the beauty of wisdom and discernment that can sometimes feel like a curse. If you are in a season that seems to be breaking your heart because it's opening your eyes, please know that the pain serves a greater purpose. For you to grow, thrive, and elevate, you must be able to acknowledge, identify, and understand truth. What you find acceptable will change. How you feel about yourself and other people will change. The environments you want to put yourself in and the conversations you will allow yourself to entertain will change. That is the point. You can't walk in spiritual blindness and expect to reach your destination or place of purpose. With those open eyes, open your mind and heart to what is revealed to you and for you. Even when you want to believe ignorance is bliss, remember that enlightenment is what will undoubtedly make you better. I love this freaking book. So when I create a list of these books, I can see how much they shaped me. I'm 46 years old, and I'm still talking about ideas I encountered when I was 23 and 24 years old. Know thyself, nothing in excess, love or fear, acceptance, surrender, intrinsic worth, curiosity instead of judgment, presence, belonging, creativity. These things stopped being things I read about and they became things I practiced. And eventually they became things that shaped how I support other people. That is the power of wisdom. That is the power of alchemizing trauma into the light and sharing it with other people. And it's the power of the right teacher and the right information finding you at the exact right time. One book gives you a question, that question takes you somewhere else. Another teacher gives you a tool, and years later, you realize you have been building a relationship with yourself the entire time. So I don't need you to remember every book I mentioned, but I hope one finds you. Maybe you need to surrender right now. Maybe you need to remember your worth or to stop fighting yourself. Maybe you need the courage to belong to yourself. And maybe you've read enough self-help books, and maybe you need to take a beat from reading self-help books, and you need big magic because it is time to create something, play, and feel alive again. Pay attention to what pulls at you. There may be a reason. I still think about that folded piece of paper in my underwear drawer at 23. I followed it, and it opened a door that I have been walking through ever since. I hope one of these books opens a door for you too. Next week, we'll get into the books that shape the way I understand trauma, shame, codependency, communication, and relationships. I love you guys. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to continue this conversation next week. Until then, you've got a lot of reading to do if you want. See you next week.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.